Welcome to the Thursday, September 3rd, 2020 meeting of the Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School Committee. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, hang on. Sorry about that.
Present here, those here are meeting Phil Muller, Brian Sullivan, and myself, and then the meeting is struggling. So, I just want to be clear on that. I'm going to start with any reports by our liaisons to the Board of Selectmen.
Madam Chair, may I?
Oh, yeah, sorry. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to Superintendent Woodward.
Thank you. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence. We've lost a couple of people who are dear to the DY community, and I'd like to read a little something about each one of them. On August 22nd, DY lost a member of our faculty that truly loved and believed in DY. Tom Lonergan passed away from a heart attack that he had suffered earlier in the week. Tom has been a fixture at DY for a long time. Tom graduated from DY in 1973, played football, basketball, and ran track. After graduation, he accepted a track scholarship to UMass and competed on the track team, throwing the shot put and the discus. He eventually returned to DY in 1998 and coached football, spring track, winter track, girls basketball, and cross country. He held the school's shot put record for 4 decades until one of his athletes that he coached diligently broke the record in the early 2000s. Tom has been instrumental in the success of both our girls track athletes and boys track athletes, mainly our throwers.
Bye, Tanner. Your dad said he'd be back around 9.
Sorry. He worked closely with Tiana Basie, who received a full scholarship to Louisville to throw the shot put, Chloe Esri, scholarship thrower at UMass Lowell, and Jasmine McFarland, who was also a scholarship thrower at UMass Lowell. Even though he was our boys track coach, he spent countless hours to help these DY girls become successful. Tom also worked for years in our special needs department and was always willing to try and help DY be a better place. Many of us know Tom as Mike Benazia's trusted sidekick in our behavior program, and many of us also think Tom was the brains behind the duo and the program's success. So Tom will definitely be missed. Also, I'd like to have us remember at this time Steve Tian. He passed away unexpectedly on August 25th. A phenomenal husband, brother, son, uncle, and father. He leaves deeply joyful memories in the hearts of those he loved. His best friend and his wife, Mary Lobig, who was a teacher of our alternative learning program at the high school. Steve was a passionate humanitarian and served on the Town of Dennis Human Services Committee for many years. He had a well-informed mind and cared deeply about issues of social justice and the environment. Steve acted as a foster parent and mentor to many teenagers over his lifetime. He was the best friend to anyone could ever want, as well as a wonderful cook and party host. Steve and Mary's home is known as a place where everyone is welcome and where great food, live music, and laughter are a must. Steve will be lovingly remembered by many, many wonderful people throughout the country. And so if we could just have a moment of silence for Tom and for Steve. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for sharing those words with us, and we send our condolences to their family and friends, certainly lost to the DY community. Returning to the agenda, any reports from our liaisons to the Board of Selectmen, which we're in the process of changing, but yes.
Right, we've been in discussions and Phil might have a little bit more about the Yarmouth side, but we're going to get the list of calendar list of the meetings and divvy those up among the members so we can make sure we have some technical coverage to be able to report of anything. So we'll work on that. The only thing I have is that we had our town election on Tuesday, and Dan Morgan was voted as the new selectman that's filling in for Norm Homecoming as well. So it's good to see Dan back on the board again. It was great what he did when he was there. So we welcome him and look forward to working with him.
And we're trying to do the same thing in Dennis to make sure we have coverage of all the, or as many of the meetings, so the boards of selectmen as we can. I don't know if Brian has been to one recently, Brian Carroll, so we'll just wait for next time for a little bit. Joe, do you have a building committee update?
I really don't have anything. I don't know if Carolyn can do. We haven't met since the last time we were here. So, but our next meeting is on September the 17th at 4:30. I believe we'll do a Zoom meeting, but I'm not sure how we're going to work that. So stay tuned for that. But again, things are progressing. I believe big forums are still meeting and trying to get things going. It's going to slow the process. This is slowing the process down a little bit, but we're still moving forward. So Ken,
yes, they recently submitted the 60% threshold, plans, designs, and all that to the MSBA. So it's that quiet project going along furiously, if you will, in the background.
Any idea how long it takes to hear back from the MSBA on that?
They've been fairly prompt, usually within a couple of weeks, and then you respond if they have any questions. And usually that process, there's a little interaction back and forth, but we haven't had any questions or seen anything that indicates there's a significant MSBA question about why are you doing that? It's often the technical people.
And can the 60% plan go out to bid, or do you have to wait for the final plan?
it has to be, we have to wait for the final plan to go out to bid. So that's down the road a little bit. One of the good things about this company, they've done this, in many school projects in the state. So they learn the ins and outs of the MSBA, what they'll think they'll accept, what they don't think they'll accept. So when they submit something like a 60% design phase, a lot of times there's no questions from the MSBA because they already know what the answer is going to be before they even ask it. So sometimes they like to push the envelope if we push them a little bit, but they let us know that they assign the flyer. We'll try it and see what happens. So they're very, very cognizant in that way. That I'm confident they're doing a good job because they're working pretty hard at making sure that it's done correctly the first time.
Once we get through the start of school, I wouldn't mind having another presentation from our from our project manager, just so we know what's coming up in the next couple of months.
Timeline.
Yeah, please.
And also in the tech school, I think is pretty much complete. And we remember years back, must have been about 4 or so years back, they were just starting the process. Or we were a year behind that, but now we're probably a couple years behind that. So just kind of put it in perspective. It is happening. It's just a little bit delayed.
Understood. A report from Assistant Superintendent.
Yes, over the last few weeks, we had the opportunity to present in Yarmouth a couple different times. The superintendent and I presented the opening plan, if you will, the DY plan to the Board of Selectmen. They gave us a good amount of time, so we really worked through the plan to give some insights into how we were preparing in those pieces. It's the same plan, of course, the committee has seen, but both towns at various times wanted us to give them the update, so we provided that. Most recently, Monday, Kristen Dwyer and I did a very brief presentation to the Yarmouth Board of Health. They just wanted to do a little follow-up, talking about some of the more nurse-related items. And again, we presented 15-20 minutes. And so I think we're keeping our community partners informed about where we are in the process, the kinds of things we're doing. I can't say enough about in both towns, though, how the boards of health have been great about when we have questions, we can reach out to them. We feel they give, they're saying, here's the regs and here's balanced input on how to meet those requirements. Both towns have been great, Bruce and Mallory and Yarmouth, and then Kristen and Carrie over in Dennis have been very helpful. Kristen Dwyer, I can't say enough about the amount of time she has spent and the expertise she has, helping us with lots of questions as we go through this process. So those places, those pieces have played out. As you know, last time I think we were here, discussed some concern about the parent survey and the number of people we haven't had received responses from. These schools then followed that up because we're still missing about 500. Did the follow-up work. We got the information to the bus company. They're working furiously on the schedules. Things look okay, if you will. It looks like it's viable without huge disruptions to start times or anything like that. We'll have a definitive answer and probably next week, but the initial look is okay. We're in a reasonable position because of the number of students doing remote or having their parents drive at each level works out so far. And again, I am cautious because I want to see the actual routes before we can say absolutely, but it looks more promising than I thought we might be looking at. So that's good. The other piece of information we received today, and that's going to require a bit more work because we have some questions. We received the initial draft of the HVAC report today. And again, just to give a little background for people who haven't been following some of this, HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, those are your heating and venting systems, the air circulation systems in your building. Lots of interest in those because of COVID-19, of course. And earlier in the summer, there were requests that we do those. Our timeline, it's been a little tight, but the day after the state, the commissioner, the ESE's office said, here's 10 approved vendors to do this kind of work. We had made arrangements with Perkins Eastman, the company we're currently working with in the school design, to have this assessment done. And so that, like other schools in the area, they come in, they do a thorough examination of all kinds of parts of your system. The initial report we received today, I have not had much time to really look at it. By the time we got it, there's about 30 to 40 pages per building. And so we'll be working on that with the engineers tomorrow. We have the conference call. And the next step normally would be, okay, we get the final report. We schedule that meeting with the committee, again, probably with the engineers, and say, here are the results. Initial review. I think we're going to have to do some mitigation work. I wish that were not the case, but I think that's where we are. We're going to need to walk through some of the specifics of this with the engineers so we can see what are the immediate mitigation fixes, if you will, small scale things that are quick. And are there any things that require more extensive work? If we had a little more time with the document today, or we've been able to meet with the engineers, I could be more concrete about that. I don't want to imply everything's perfect, but I don't want to suggest certainly that, oh gosh, there's tremendous numbers of issues with this. We just need a little bit of time with the engineers to say, walk us through this. How do we address some of these pieces? In terms of opening school, we need to be cautious. We need to have the abundance of caution. And I know we've all been committed to getting as many students into our buildings as soon as possible. We also know our families and our staff need to be able to make plans. And I feel I need to recommend that we consider doing remote learning only for the first several weeks until Monday, October 5th. So if there are some HVAC issues that need work that we can't do within 2 or 3 days, we could get that scheduled. We all know, I wish I was bringing different options to the committee, but as I was noted as saying in the paper, it's hard to make a decision to have some of that definitive information about is everything, should we keep moving forward or should we slow it down? Related option would be those 3 remaining PD days that we haven't scheduled. If theoretically the 16th, 17th, and 18th were used for that additional professional development, and then the remote would start on the 21st, the 3 days, lots of conversations, superintendent most recently today with the tech department, the 700 plus iPads we had purchased for the PK, first, second, third grade students. Tech team's pretty confident they'd be ready, parents could pick them up. So then at least all the younger kids would have, younger students would have a device at home. So when we're doing remote for several weeks, they have that device available. I think there's many things we'd probably rather be considering. The worry I would have is if we don't go in this direction, if we do need to do some specific work, then parents aren't finding out for another week or something that they should be making certain kinds of plans. So clearly it's disappointing news. However, I think it's too early to say, oh my, we can't open for months or something like that. I don't think that's a valid based on the initial information. And I'll turn it over to the superintendent because as required, if you have any questions about that open day.
Sorry, it's hard to be the camera person and the superintendent. There we go. All right, so I had a, believe it or not, a text conversation with the commissioner today, telling him that we had received the draft report, and we still have to meet with the engineers to really see what this is. As you can imagine, it's not necessarily an expertise that Ken and I have. So we need to hear what it is that we're really looking at. But as Ken says, kind of out of an abundance of caution, what we don't want to do is put parents in a difficult position of waiting another week before we can come back to the committee or something and say, well, now we think we need a couple of weeks to do remote. So one of the things that the commissioner did do, he had his operations person call us, and we went over. She said, are you making sure that people are getting a list of things that, they need to screen for so that everybody's coming to school as healthy as they possibly can? Yes. The answer to that is yes. Are you masking? Yes. Are we doing physical distancing? Yes. In fact, we told her the 6 feet. She said that's above what we require. Are you cohorting? And what that means is keeping groups of kids together so that they're not spread all over, we're not having as few contacts with each other as possible. Yes. How about the rigorous cleaning and the hygiene? Absolutely. So she said the last thing is really this whole idea of the ventilation. So she said it's part of a whole picture. It's not just one thing all by itself, because there may be things that you can do, like just making sure your windows are open. Maybe things like box fans, and I know some other districts have done some of that kind of stuff. Maybe some things like an air purifier in some locations, things like that. So that's what we'll be looking for from the engineers, is to help us to better understand what they saw and what needs to be done right away, and some things that might not be able to or need to be done at all. Obviously, as she said, you're not going to change your whole HVAC system. So as Ken said, I think that we want to be cautious. We do feel, it was helpful to hear that this is part of the whole strategy, not just the only piece. And we've seen some of our neighboring school districts just in recent days have to say, well, they need some things that they have to fix too. So they're going to go remote, at least for now. Now, maybe it'll be longer. We just don't know. And we don't want to be like the sky is falling. But we also don't want to have parents, and I have to say, I'm super grateful to our teachers. These PD days have gone very, very well. We probably have close to 75% of our kids wanting to be back in person, and our teachers as well. We've been able to set up different cohorts so that if we have a group of students that needs to be remote or wants to be remote, that we're able to match them up with some teachers who need to be remote also. So that part's going very, very well. As Ken says, this is a little bit on the disappointing side, but we're not alone. This is around the time that everybody seems to be getting their reports and doing their things. We know of some neighboring school districts that haven't even received their reports yet. So I think that if we look at just a little bit of a shift to our calendar, utilize those 3 additional professional days, that will give our tech team time to get our iPads ready for our youngest students. And then we can think about how we're going to, it'll be a little easier than it was last spring in getting those iPads out to our students. We'll have some more time for our teachers to plan for at least a couple of weeks of remote, and then we'll take it from there. If we can come back to the committee, once we have, we're gonna have that conversation tomorrow, we can see what their availability is to come back and chat with the committee about what needs to be done, and then we can make some adjustments accordingly. I mean, if we can get back sooner, great, but we just don't want parents to be left in the lurch, and we just feel that we needed to bring this to you tonight, even though we really don't have all the answers right now. So that's where we are, and I guess, you know, if there are any questions that we could answer or you discussion amongst the committee.
Yeah, a few questions.
I'm sorry?
We don't have air conditioning, but do we use the heat in September?
We don't use the heat. There are some HVAC air conditioning units, and it's, I understand the question is about the flow of the air through the unit vents to exchange so many times per hour. But it's not the heat.
How many kids do we have get sick last year because of the heating event? AC?
I don't believe there's any documented cases that I'm aware of. I can double check the records, but there's nothing that's jumped out to us as those are issues.
You know, I'm 100% opposed to remote from the get-go. I'm not interested in remote at all. I don't see any evidence at this point to suggest that I should change my mind on that. I understand what you're saying. Maybe we need to take a look at some of our heating and ventilation systems. Clearly, the ventilation is not on in this room. This heat is not on in this room. The air is what it is. We're going to do social distancing, which is more than adequate. We're in a very low risk area for any sort of infection. We don't have a documented history of an outbreak of any sort of infection in the past. I see no reason to change anything, and I'm not going to vote for anything other than what we've already stated. That's what I see.
There was no.
There's much to support the medical and health departments of state and town for the work they've done and the planning they've done. But obviously there's people, parents and teachers and other staff and community people. These are scary times, and we have to address those, even if there is safety factors built in and protocols that really work. I have been following Dr. Ashish Shah, who's now moved from Boston to be the dean of the Brown School of Public Health. And he has confidence here in New England for all of the medical folks who've done their work and the preparations being done. But these are experiences out of our own times, never in our times. And I really want to be supportive and understand people who would be reluctant, but I think we are going pell-mell as fast as practical to create a healthier climate for what we face if we don't do it right. I think we're in one of the best states and best locations in that state for what we're doing. But we've got to keep our ear to the ground and be a positive and immediate responder to all the questions. Thanks.
Thank you. I also had a couple of questions about it. We talked about the buses and things first. So if a student, say a parent wanted to drive their student to school, if we decide to go back, when we decide to go back to school, and and then they decide, I can't drive them to school anymore, they have to contact the school, and then there'd be a time frame, just like them returning back to school, you know, for the teacher, there would be a time frame that they'd have to wait to
Yes.
make sure that they can get someone, so they couldn't just jump on the bus the next day. Kind of thing.
Absolutely, as you might imagine, because most buses will have the full 23 students on them.
Right, okay, I just want to make sure that that's pretty clear that they can't just, you know, if a parent says, well, I'm running late, I can't, you just jump on the bus, that can't happen. You know, unfortunately, it's just, that's the way that's going to work. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. As far as, Brian is making very good points. I think it's, you know, there are, the heat, the system, and you wouldn't have heat now anyways, but you do have air movement to move the air around. It's not on now, will it come on? Who knows? So, you know, I don't see the danger of it. However, this report that came out, you know, I think that has to be looked at a little tighter, because like you said, it could be something it can take a week to fix. It could be something it take a month that might be able to fix, or it might be just astronomically expensive to fix it at all. I think from the get-go, you know, I've always believed in the fact that, you know, bringing the kids back to school was the most important thing, socially and emotionally, and for learning experience. I think is the most important thing, but it has to be done safely. Have we done that? Have we lived up to that safe part to date? Yes, I think, you know, all the work that you guys have done, the school nurse has done, and everybody's done, I think we've lived up to that. You know, the social distancing, masks, you know, everything, you know, we've done that part. The unknown part, like you said, is the ventilation system, and that's just like Carol was saying, that's just one part of that whole big mix. But it is something that has to be looked at, because I think the safety of our students and staff are the utmost important. Again, it's something I'm not sure. I don't know how we vote for it at this point, just because I understand one side of the coin, but I also, like Brian, feel that, hey, you know, we haven't had any problems. The Cape is been low for the past 2-3 months, even with all the tourists coming down, which is great, because that's how the Cape survives. And it's still, you know, it's still not that, we're still at a lower rate. If you look at the map, you know, with the different colors and things like that, Barnstable is now yellow instead of green, or white or gray or whatever you want to call it. You know, the influx of people coming to the Cape hasn't increased our numbers at all. So that's something to look at. So again, I'm just kind of torn between the two. So that's kind of where I stand.
Yeah, I'm also a little,
Try to call on Joe.
what is it?
Do we want to try to call on Joe, see if he has any comments? Joe, are you there?
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Two things. Do we have previous ventilation inspections from public health or from OSHA or any other type of inspections that we do annually previously to see where we were before we get these new reports?
We can use our baselines from E&E, the energy management people we work with, especially in the winter, and we can get all that data, so there's some comparison pieces. Yes, I think that's what you're driving at for the question, for like airflow and such.
Exactly. That's great, Ken. Thank you.
So several pieces to this. So even if we do decide to go remote at first, because of the HVAC issues, I'd really like us to start remote, to start school no matter what on September 16th. I feel like we've been telling parents all along, and we've understood all along, that we were going to be ready to go on September 16th, for both in-person and remote. And I'd really like us to start on September 16th. As a committee member, I feel like there has been, we've had since March as a district, as a community, to figure out how to do remote learning. And we were supposed to be ready to go on September 16th, and I'd like to go that date. As a parent, I can't imagine going any longer without school for my child, even if it is remote. I mean, you know, it's been a long, boring summer without camp and activities and travel and friends. And, you know, I realize it's only 3 more days we're talking, 2 or 3 more days we're talking about, but like, I really would just want to start as a parent and as a committee member. And, you know, I hate to use those 3 professional development days now, not knowing what this year could look like. And if there's some sort of dramatic turn later in this year and we need those professional development days for teachers to be able to pivot and go in, like, deal with stuff in the classroom, taking stuff in or out, or learning a new program that we have to, who knows when. I mean, the only thing we know right now is that we don't know what can happen. So I'd like to be able to save those days for the future when we might need them. Going remote, I mean, yeah, right now we feel very safe in this room. You know, we've got windows and doors open, and we're more than 6 feet apart from each other, but you know, this is also not a classroom of 10 or 12 kids and with a teacher facing them. You know, we have a lot of space between each other. I mean, and you know, if every classroom had nice big windows and doors like this that we could open, doors at both ends and windows on both sides, and everybody was spread out like this, that would be one thing. But we know it can be hot in September in these buildings. We know it can be very hot in September in some of these buildings. And if, you know, unless we're all going to run out and buy 1 million fans to place around it, even then, a fan doesn't do this thing. And I'm no expert in this, clearly. But a fan doesn't do what a ventilation system does. So, and maybe the experts will tell us we can use fans in some areas. But on the flip side, I'm also, well, maybe not on the flip side, parents need to be aware as of right now that we may not be able to open to in-person on September 16th, depending on what's in that report. So everybody right now should be thinking about that and thinking about their backup plans if they were going in person. But until we know what's in that report, I really don't want to jump the gun. Oh, not supposed to jump the gun. Really not supposed to jump the gun and vote on. Remember, Kristen got in trouble last time.
Yeah, so you did it twice.
Yeah. Vote on this tonight. I mean, if that report says that, you know, we're pretty good in most of our schools and we need to replace a few parts in a couple buildings, then we've jumped the gun. I've done it again. And what else can I say? What's a good expression?
I just did.
Okay. And, you know, we might have some minor repairs that we can get done pretty quickly, and we don't need to be remote in all our schools for the whole rest of the month or 3 or 4 weeks. So we need to know what's in that report. Can you get through that report with the engineers tomorrow? And can we have an emergency meeting if we need to next week to re-vote on this issue? That's what I would prefer. I also want to know if we need to make major repairs or semi-major repairs under this report, who's paying for that? Like, we're already going to be at stretching our limits to pay with all the PPE and extra personnel we're going to need and time and extra cleaning and all this, you know. Where's this money coming from to make these HVAC repairs? I didn't help the situation any with my comments, but Brian, so.
So I just have a comment and observation, okay? So last meeting, we had the nurse, her name is Kristen come in, and she explained that, you know, for a person to contract the virus, they have to be in close proximity for, you know, with an infected person showing symptoms for 15 minutes or more, right? The CDC says the same thing. So that I feel pretty confident that, first of all, you have to have a sick person, right? And you have to be in close proximity. Now I work with the public every day, and I work in a building where the air conditioning is on all day. I've been working in a public building with people coming off the street since May. And I've probably sat within 3 feet of 200 people for 15 minutes or more since then. And not one person I work with, there's 20 people or so that work in my building. Not one of us has got sick. Not one person has walked in sick that I'm aware of, and if they did, none of us got sick. And we have an air conditioning system that was probably built in the 70s, and in all likelihood, doesn't have a HEPA filter built in. So we're right now considering canceling the opening of in-person schooling because our buildings, which don't have air conditioning and don't have a fan running on a regular basis, because they're old. I'm sorry, but I have to draw the line and say this makes absolutely no sense. And in my opinion, the unknown factors that are happening to our students right now far outweigh the very small risk that somebody contracts the virus. I mean, I can't imagine what's happening in some of these homes. I know I went through it, okay? So being trapped at home, and nowhere to go, and no safe place, this is a safe place for kids. And it needs to be a safe place again. And for those reasons right there, that reason, I don't care. I'm not going to change my vote. Because this has to be a place where kids can come and be safe. No, I think you guys did an excellent job. This plan is 100 times more than what we do at my work. Easily. It's 100 times more than most places are doing to make sure the kids are safe. So what's going to be next week if it's not the HVAC? It's going to be something else, right? I'm against remote. The kids need to be back in school. Enough is enough. Let's put this behind us. If we're forced to vote on it tonight, I'm voting no. And I'll be honest with you, it doesn't matter what happens, I'm voting no on it next week too. So that's this way. The kids need to be in school.
But I kind of concur with Jenny. I think it's important. It's very important that we see what this report is all about. I don't want to have to make a move right now. I think it is kind of putting the cart before the horse. But I think at this point, we've gone down this road and we say, okay, we're going to open the 16th. We're going to go K through, K through 7 is going to be, in school all the time. We're going to have a hybrid at the high school. We've got our map. We've got our plan in place that it meets all the guidelines that we need to meet. We got this piece about the ventilation system, which I believe we really need to look at, because if it comes back and it does need major repairs and it's spitting dust out or whatever it's doing, we need to address that. And if we do need to push things back and go remote for a couple of weeks, then so be it. But I don't think at this point it's a good idea to make that decision right now. And I know it puts pressure on you guys because of the fact you're going to meet with engineers tomorrow and we're going to explain some stuff to you. But on the other hand, I think you need to meet with them. You need to understand the report. You need to come back to us and say, well, this is what it is. And we can put fans in. We can put fans at Station Ave. And that's all needs to happen at Station Ave. We have to put 12 fans in and we're all good to go. So Station Ave is good to go. Maybe the high school is a little different. Maybe the high school needs a filters change. I don't know. I'm not a professional at this, but maybe that needs more extensive work. So, okay, what can we do there? There's got to be some alternatives, because I think getting these children back into the school building is super important, and it outweighs the risk with the mitigations and things like that we have in place already, that we put in a plan. So I think that's the important thing. So I'm all for, if we have to meet next Wednesday or next week, then I think we do that and get a better idea and then make a decision. Then we have an informed, real decision, that we can make a decision. So,
Oh, yes. Well, it's not up now. Be unmuted. He's unmuted.
Joe Glenn, did you have something to add? Your hand up, is that like, that's at one point?
Not to get ahead of myself, but I did want to follow up on what you said, Jenny. The unfunded mandates that we talked about in the beginning on where we're going to get the money that we don't have, that the towns have already budgeted for, that we can't go back and get anymore. If the superintendent is talking to the commission, we need to say, and I'm sure other districts are doing this also, but we need to say that the Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School District needs money for X. If we know that we got to pay for some ventilation systems, let's get at the front of the race and the front of the bus and make sure that we get the money. And we say, like we did from the very beginning, that we're being saddled with unfunded mandates, and we're not gonna, we want to make sure that we get the money. So like we said before, we want to ask for it, because if we don't ask for it, we're certainly not going to get it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the report. No one has made a motion, so I imagine that we're just moving on at this point.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
should we make a motion to meet, or I don't think you can make a motion, but can we plan on possibly having a meeting next week?
I think
I don't think we need to have a motion for that, but I think if we can.
my plan would definitely be to, as soon as Ken can have it back through this report with the engineers and have, to schedule a meeting. So
I think it's important because, like Carol said, parents need to.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
You can't throw this on.
Monday is Labor Day, so we can't meet on Monday. But I'm just pulling up my calendar now to take a look, but, this has to be pretty quick.
I mean, the report is done and you can say what schools need what and things like that. It'd be a fairly quick meeting. It's not.
Right, and this would be the only item. I mean, I imagine Tuesday evening. We can't do Monday as Labor Day. Could everybody make a meeting Tuesday evening?
Possibly.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm not sure that we would meet the 48-hour
48 hours.
posting because Monday's a holiday.
But it's an emergency, right?
Could be.
Yeah,
I would
sure.
consider this an emergency if we need to change the start date of school within 2 weeks of school starting. No,
I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
I mean, we can get some clarification.
Should I check with the attorney?
If you can, please, but
Tuesday would be your first choice.
Tuesday would be my first choice if we call it, if we consider this an emergency. I consider it an emergency.
Well, it's up to you.
So, right, I mean, I'll get some advice from Andy just to make sure, but I consider this an emergency. So you could do Tuesday night?
I agree.
Okay. So it looks like generally, Joe, you could possibly do Tuesday depending on the timing,
No, it depends on the wind.
the wind.
The air quality.
I will pray for no wind or lots of wind.
I'll be there.
All right. So we're gonna look for Tuesday as long as we can meet the requirements. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is the mask policy, because nothing's easy right now, so. I'll move on to another difficult topic. So first we need to dispense with our policy on policy, which usually requires additional readings. So that
Move to dispense the policy adoption sequence under file BGB policy adoption in order to meet emergency conditions.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor of dispensing with the policy on policies for tonight?
Aye.
All right, Joe Glenn.
Aye.
Okay, so unanimous. Thank you. All right, so everyone has the mask the draft mask policy called face coverings. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to read it. Does anyone have any questions for Ken or Carol on this policy? Brian?
I mean, I read it. It's a little bit too strict for me in a lot of ways. Some of the language I think we don't need to have. I definitely don't want to have a disciplinary clause built in for the kids. I could start off where I think some changes should be made, or I don't really have any questions. I'm assuming they didn't write this. This is probably given from.
There was an MASC.
Right, so this came back, which is typical. So, but I can't be supportive of this with the current way it's written.
Why don't you tell us which parts you would like to change them and see what else that everybody.
So I think if we just skip the first paragraph, I'm fine with that. Second paragraph is fine. I'm not necessarily in agreement with it, but it's fine. It's the third paragraph where, and I'll start where it says, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, DPH, the following requirements are in place until further notice. And I'd rather not have them until further notice because I'm hoping we don't have to have this for very long. So I'd like to put an expiration date on it. And then if we need to re-up it, that's fine. But until further notice implies that this could be forever. And that kind of goes in violation of my new normal policy, which I'm opposed to. So, and then with regards to the next sentence, this is a face covering that covers the nose and mouth must be worn by individuals in school buildings, on school grounds, and on school transportation, even when physical distancing is observed. I want to change the word must to encouraged, and I don't see any reason why people should be wearing a mask outside if they're on school grounds or by themselves. I don't want to put people in a position where sometimes people get a little bit overzealous, and I don't want people to be running around with this in their hands, shaming other people. And I see a lot of that happening in general, so I don't want to have it happen in our schools. I think the next line where it says students in all grade levels must wear masks. I'm very concerned about kids, young kids, and I know I've seen some young kids out there with masks on, with their parents and stuff. But the kids with speech problems, with hearing issues, with behavioral issues, especially below the grade 5, I think should be encouraged to wear a mask, but not required. That's kind of where I am on that. I mean, the older kids are fine, but not all the kids are going to get this right away. It's going to be difficult. Let's see. The next paragraph starts off, masks can be disposed or reusable. I'm fine with that. It's fine, I suppose. And then we can go to page 2. This is really where I get a little bit nervous. I don't think on the top of this page, the students may be exempted from this policy due to special behavior or individualized needs as determined by a special education director in consultation with the district's nurse leader. Okay, I don't see it. In the next sentence, it says a written note from a physician is required for a requested exemption. I don't see any reason to get a doctor involved in any of this. Kids don't need to go to the doctor because they have behavioral problems or they're having anxiety because of it. I mean, that's asking a little bit too much of young kids. So I just strike that completely. And then the next paragraph starts off, a student's mask or face covering is to be provided by the student's family. I'd like to add in there that if possible, we could do that. Some people may not have them or have the means. So I know we have plenty of them to supply anyway, so I'd just rather use that. The next paragraph where it says if students are in violation of this policy, The building principal will consult with the parent guardian to determine whether an exemption is appropriate, or the student may be removed from the school building, or the person learning until such time they comply with the requirement, or the requirement is lifted. I'd like to remove that paragraph completely. The next paragraph says violations of this policy by staff will be handled in the same manner as violations of school committee policy. I'd also like to eliminate that paragraph. And the next sentence says visitors to the school will be limited. However, any visitor in violation of this policy will be denied entry to the school or district facility. I'm okay with visitors to the school. The rest I think should be eliminated. And that's pretty much about it. The next one, this policy shall remain in effect until December 1st, as opposed to rescinded by us. We could forget, and then it's always here. So I just rather have some time date on it. It's kind of redundant that it's in there twice. I'm a little bit nervous about having the kids in the school and then folks getting upset and being arguments and behavior management problems, and kids with speech problems and hearing. We're going to have to try to do our best, but having a policy this strict was obviously not written by somebody that's ever done this before, because nobody's done this before. It's a little bit too strict for my liking.
Thank you, Nate. I think when we put together a policy, it needs to have some bite to it. You know, we said before that Ken and Carol and the staff and the teachers and everybody have put together a plan. And that plan included face coverings. So we need to have a policy of face coverings. It is kind of stringent. It is kind of tight, and I don't agree with a lot of it personally, but I feel that in order to have parents feel safe and teachers feel safe in the school, we have to have something that's pretty stringent. One of the things that I do definitely agree with Brian is where it says on the second page, student's mask and face covering is to be provided by the student's family. That's great, but what happens when the kid doesn't come to school with one, or the parent can't get a hold of one? So I think if that is possible, or by the district, you know, I think that's
The second line.
That's right. Staff members respond, right? So that's what I'm saying. We have to, if they forget it, we have to be able to provide.
It does, it says where the district will supply.
Okay, right.
We're right.
And that's fine. Again, I think it is strict. It is kind of stringent. It's very, very restrictive. But I feel it's the way that it's written. It needs to have some bite. And until further notice, and I think we'll know as a committee when that time will be, based on scientific data, based on the nurse saying, okay, I think we're good. You know, it wouldn't come just from we wouldn't decide that. We would decide that after having input from the stakeholders and things like that. So I don't have a problem having it be in there until further notice. We'll just have to make sure that kids are going to want to, teachers want to get these masks out as soon as they can. So I'm sure we'll hear from them a lot quicker than we think, and there won't be something that will get forgotten. So I'm okay with it.
I would agree with Joe. I definitely respect the cautions or the concerns that Brian brings up. But from some of the things I've seen for camps, summertime activity that was organized, the restrictions are more as a warning from those who are aware of what can be done with kids and adults who spit and cough on purpose as a method of acting out. Right now, we're not really worried about too much. I mean, count of Iowa, I mean, the state of Iowa, 79% positive rates. I hesitate to even breathe in that situation. I think it's useful to keep it in, but check, we have a responsibility to see how responses unfold, what type of feedback we get, and the teachers and the parents have to carry it out. Overall, I think it's pretty well covered.
Joe Glenn, anything?
Yes, I agree with both, actually all three, Joe Tierney, Brian Sullivan, and Phil Moritz. The setting the policy is different than the procedures and what actually happens, like in a pool or a beachfront or fire drills. We set up a policy that is more restrictive, and then the administration and the staff and the teachers and the kids themselves and the parents with input on what happens afterwards. That will help clarify the glitches. So the technical language of must versus will versus whatever, we have to be more restrictive in our policy. Although I agree with some of the points that Brian made, we might want to change a few of those words, but I think the policy should be more restrictive, just until we can see what happens in practice. Thank you.
So a strict policy like this is one of the things that makes me feel okay about sending my son to school. You know, he doesn't go into buildings without a mask on. He doesn't go to other people's homes except the people that we're in our little bubble with, and he doesn't go out in crowds, you know, without a mask. None of us do. So this is what I need to feel safe about sending my son to school, especially, you know, my son, like many other kids, have medical conditions, making them somewhat compromised, and, you know, I need a strict policy, and I like this policy. I do appreciate the fact that some students cannot or will not be providing their own masks. Their families can't or will occasionally forget, or they'll run out, or whatever it is. So I appreciate the fact that we're going to be supplying those. I don't want that to ever be a problem. You know, nobody should have to be begging for a mask, or, you know, and maybe we should have a procedure in place for each school where, you know, if families need to reach out to the school principal and say, you know, we don't want to be begging for them, and we shouldn't be. Nobody should have to be. Like, let's just make these masks available to families that need them. So
We can do that.
please. There are a couple very technical issues, I think, in paragraph 4, where it says, in addition, bandanas that loosely hand over mouth, we should say hang over mouth.
Yes.
And above that, where it says, 2 layers of breathable material fit snugly but comfortably against the side of the face and be secured with ties or ear loops. I don't know how specific we need to get there, because I don't want someone running afoul of the policy just because their mask is slightly different. You know, the mask that I've now bought for my son have a loop that goes around his head. It's not a tie, it's not an ear loop, but I'm confident it fits these requirements. So I think if we just take out the word ear, and it's secured with ties or loops, that would cover a sort of a more broad category of, you know, the loops that go around his head allow him to put it down around his neck without losing it and be able to pull it right back up. So, and then I do question in paragraph 3 where we say, face covering must be worn by all individuals in school buildings, on school grounds, and school transportation. On school grounds, I don't know about that. I mean, if we have parents walking away from the school to back to their car in their parking lot, they don't need to be wearing a mask if there's nobody around them. If we're letting kids go out for breaks or quote unquote recess, they're not gonna have to be. So, and I don't know that we can require everybody walking on the school grounds. Once they enter the building, I feel confident we can and should, but so I question that. I do think it doesn't need to say until further notice, but I could also see having it for this school year with this understanding that we could rescind it if we need to at some point, but I mean, you know, all policies are really until further notice, essentially. All policies stay in place until they're changed. So I'm okay with that language. So I support the policy with those minor changes. Taking out the word ear, changing hand to hang, and possibly removing school grounds, or maybe saying on school grounds with exceptions or something. Yeah, I don't know what we're doing on that part. Kara?
I think the on-school grounds is really kind of talking about our students. So one of the things that we had this summer was when we had our summer care program, you know, kids would play outside. And yes, we allowed them to take their masks off, but they had to maintain that physical distancing. Some of the kids wanted to be a little closer together, so they would wear their masks. So I don't think it's a strict, like, you know, if we saw somebody without a mask walking across the parking lot, that someone would run out and say, hey, you can't do that.
But I think that's the kind of thing that Brian Sullivan is a little worried about, right? That somebody's gonna point and say, you were standing in the parking lot without a mask on. You know what I mean? So if we can avoid some of that.
We can't avoid what the public does, but we can avoid, I mean, there's not gonna be a school person running out to there to tell someone, you know what I mean? Like,
There's no mask police.
exactly.
But people are gonna be self-appointed mask police.
But that can happen, that might happen anyway.
And that's, right, in the public,
Could be because of
we've
the
seen this
policy.
in the restaurant industry, that a lot of restaurants that have been closed down, is because people, they go out and they see somebody without a mask somewhere, so they make that complaint to the town, and that's what the town health departments are responding to, you know, other patrons' complaints that, you know, she was sitting 5 feet from me and she didn't have her mask on. Well, that's just, I'm sorry, that's just quite stupid. But
I was just hoping to
what-
avoid
right.
some of that. If people are going on school grounds.
I don't think, yeah, I don't think the intent of that was possible to say, you can't, you have to walk to your car with it. I think the intent of that statement was more, you know, like Carol said, that if you're gonna be within 6 feet of each other.
No, I understand the intent, but as written, it's very restrictive.
It is, right?
Right.
So I just want to give you a little bit of background where I'm coming from on something, because maybe it was lost in, and I kind of went first, so I understand. So all I can go on is based on my experience as growing up as a kid, right? Because my experience is probably different from your experience. Everybody else is different, right? And I can think back and I think to myself, how would I have handled this situation? And I had a hard time in school as it was, without a mask, just being frustrated and angry all the time. And I put myself in the position of a kid that's coming maybe from an abusive household, and they've been in there, trapped in their house since March, and maybe we're gonna push it back a couple of weeks. And then that person, who hasn't learned anything really, probably since then, is gonna be asked to wear a mask, but hasn't been asked to wear it at all by anybody, ever. And we're gonna expect them, we're gonna hold them to this standard. And that's gonna be difficult to do. It's gonna be really difficult to do. And I can say confidently, as a young person, I'd have been one of those difficult people. And I'm concerned that those kids are gonna be disproportionately punished. And it's not necessarily their fault. It's definitely not their fault. They didn't ask for this. They didn't ask for this virus to come around. And they certainly didn't ask for all of these restrictions. Now we can argue, I understand what Jenny's saying, you know, I want you to feel safe about sending your kid to school, I do. But some of this stuff, I mean, and I agree with, you know, getting a doctor's note. Do you think the parents are gonna take their kids to the doctor? Get a note? I tell you right now, my parents would not have taken me to the doctor. I'd have got a backhand, and that'd have been the end of that. And I don't want that happening. So maybe maybe things have changed a little bit, maybe, maybe that doesn't happen anymore. Kind of hard to believe that doesn't happen anymore. I just don't want something to, we're in a sterile environment right now. We're trying to determine something that's never been done before and hope it goes well. It's not gonna go well. It's gonna be a mess because nobody's ever done this before. And I don't want kids, maybe they, have trouble learning or speaking or hearing, being disciplined because they can't follow us. And I don't want them kicked out of school because they can't follow us. So that's where I'm coming from, especially on the part, the doctors know part, and the kids are going to be sent home to remote learning. That's the last thing these kids need. The very last thing. Kid can't wear a mask in school because he's got behavioral problems. You're going to send him back home. Absolutely not. I know in practice it's different, but you're asking me to vote for something that I cannot sign off on, especially with the violation part. Some of it, I tried to soften the policy, but I can be reasonable. I understand Jenny's perspective. I don't get the opportunity to talk to parents in your position very often, so I have my own little bubble like we all do. But I have a difficulty with removing kids from a building because they can't comply. We live in America still. Doesn't feel like it right now, but we do. And I don't want to lose track of that. And I think a little bit we are. So if we can just soften that part, especially the disciplinary part, I'll be able to go along.
Carol?
I think people are hitting the nail on the head for a lot of different pieces. Part of the strength of the policy, as Jenny brings up, is that what we're trying to do is help people to realize that their children will be safe when they send them to school. Again, I'll draw on my experience from the summertime. We had some highly specialized programs that ran in the summer, extended school year programs with children with individualized education plans. And many of them didn't wear masks because their disability was such that it wouldn't have worked. None of those children ever got kicked out of programs. I think having a strong policy makes people feel comfortable, but part of the reason that relies on the nurse and the director of special education is because the director of special education understands the various, whether for some of our kids it is behavior. It's behavior. We don't want those kids kicked out either. But we have a strong policy so that parents don't feel that everyone's going to run amok and do whatever they want, and then their child's not going to be safe if their child has an underlying condition or whatever that possibly could be deadly due to COVID. So I guess what I'd ask is that you consider the fact that as educators, this is what we do really well. We have our PBIS teams have been meeting about the masks. They've been planning some lessons, shall we say, about hygiene and masking and those sorts of things. And I think it's one of the things that we do really well in the school district is help kids get better at things, whether it's learning to read or, hey, we all got to wear a mask and why is that important? So I totally understand where Mr. Sullivan's coming from. We would never want that to happen. And if we found out that stuff like that was happening, we would want to take that into hand. But I think it's about the balance. And I think that's what you're saying also. It's about the balance. Sometimes for some kids, it's just, the Weisenheimer kid who pulls down his mask and starts coughing all over the guy who's sitting next to him. We should have a conversation. Yeah. But the kid who just takes down his mask because he had to itch his nose, no. So guess what I'm trying to say is, I think the policy does have to be strong. Certainly, this was run by our nurse leader, Kristen, that you guys met. We've also had some conversations with our school doctor. So, not that the doctor would be anything about the discipline, but I think we can trust the people that you've hired to do these jobs and do them well. And if we thought they weren't, then we should deal with that on a different kind of level.
Right, I don't think we actually had a motion before we started this discussion, so I'm a little out of order, but Jeff, yeah, please.
Okay, just, I had one comment, I was gonna make a motion about the violation thing, and there has to be a consequence. The policy, you have to have a consequence. So I understand that, the violation of policy, the building principal will consult with the parent and guardian to determine whether an exception is appropriate. I think that to me is that the school principal will lead the parents and say, okay, this is what happened. We have this policy. Can we work with you and make sure that, he's going to follow that student's going to follow that policy. If not, remote learning may be the best option for now. So I think it's something, the principals that we have now are all really, really good, and they're willing to work with the parents and talk to the parents. So I think, there has to be a consequence piece in any policy. So that's fine. So I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the face covering policy file EBCFA with the following amendments if possible. Remove the word year in paragraph 4. Change the word hand to hang. I don't know if that's just a spelling thing, so it probably doesn't matter. And in paragraph 6, strike the sentence, a written note from the physician is required for a requested exemption. Make that motion.
Is there a second? Bill seconded the motion.
Can we just go over that again?
The amended policy would be the word where it says fit snugly and comfortably against the side of the face and secured with ties or ear loops. We'll strike the word ear. So we'll just say loop. So if a student wants to have something around the back of his neck or head, that would be acceptable. Then the word hand, we'll change that to hang, which is a spelling issue, and just strike the sentence. A written note from a physician is required for request exemption in paragraph 6.
So I'm actually one of the proponents of putting in that sentence, a written note from a physician is required. And no, I mean, everybody will vote on this how they want, but I will not approve this policy without some language about from whom we will accept a note. I've seen too many posts on Facebook by parents saying, well, I'm getting a note from so-and-so, like my kids, whoever is writing a note. And that's not good enough for me. Like, I really need to know that this child sitting next to my son has an exception or an exemption from the mask for a valid reason, and that someone has legitimately signed off on that, and this is just not, willy-nilly. So that's my 2 cents on that. Anybody else? Bill, Brian?
Jenny?
Impressed over the years as I've learned more and more from staff of regular day and SPED, the range of professional responses to given situations of behavior, sometimes intentional, some unintentional. I think as a parent, Jenny expresses the idea she wants the safety. I think Carol mentions the fact that the staff can build a response that fits the situation, but they need a strong base on which to start. It's far more complicated for working under these conditions than it would be just opening up a room full of first graders to have some fun on a playground. It's the professionalism that's required among the adult in the teaching staff is incredible, and we've added, by necessity, a level more complicated than before, and not just because of SPED, but because of all the kids and interactions. I think if you pay attention to the concerns that the folks with, commend Brian for his articulate expression of his own experience. It was more meaningful than he perhaps realizes. And with that being said, I defer to staff decisions at the time and at the place to do any professional variations from what has been strictly set out.
So yeah, so I have a personal perspective and then I have kind of a philosophical perspective. Philosophically, I kind of feel like this is the state ramming this down our school. And I oppose that. I understand people want their kids to be safe. I want the kids to be safe too. But I haven't seen any evidence that they're not safe. There's zero evidence they're not safe. We're gonna do way more than we need to make sure they're safe. And if by the off chance, somebody contracts the virus, I hope not. They're probably, I like the good, gonna be fine. We're arguing over language and a policy that is written by somebody else. We didn't come up with this, they did. And that's why I'm a little bit upset about that, because the folks that wrote this are the same people that put in our business out of business. And that upsets me. So I'm not gonna vote for it.
Joe Glenn?
I don't think that anybody doesn't have compassion for what Brian is saying. I think that I always bring it back to fire drills. I don't know if that's my history of working with the fire department or what, but even in the military, even with sports, there's a level of discipline, and we might be able to identify people while we're trying to create a culture that we might be able to identify that they are a problem, and not that they are a problem, but there is a problem in their life. And we might be able to do it by instituting these rules. I agree with Brian 100% that we don't want to put rules in place that don't need to exist. And that's going to level out as time goes by here. But when we're setting a policy, we're letting it's just like lockdown policies and other policies. We might not ever need them, but we want to have them in place. We want to set the policies, and then the procedures in how they're enacted and executed by the administration and by teachers and by families. It'll be part of the communication process. We've said all along that we're trying to create a culture, and part of that's why I thought sports and activities, and extracurricular activities are so important, and they are so important in the educational outcomes of kids, is because of that discipline and the things that they learn through sports and other activities. So I am compassionate to what Brian has said, and Phil is absolutely right that his personal experience weighs a lot and has a lot of value. But we're creating a policy, and how it's executed may not, like those fire drills, we hope we never have to use them. But if we can make the changes and make changes that Brian is comfortable with, and the ones that Joe Tanny has already said, that would be, I would be okay with that. But I understand if Brian votes against it, because I get what he's saying in regards to someone else creating the policy. Thank you.
you know, I'm thinking about my comment about the note from the physician, and, you know, I think that we're actually, there are two different types of exemptions or exceptions. And the one that I'm thinking about that would require a physician's note is for, you know, it says, for instance, the CDC recommends the mask should not be worn by anyone who has trouble breathing, right? So if a parent doesn't want their child to wear a mask because they have a physical condition or
This one.
asthma or whatever it is, you know, even though I think Kristen said that asthma isn't necessarily always a condition that requires, but that's what I'm talking about for physician's note. The other part, exempted from the policy due to special behavioral or individualized needs as determined by the special education director in consultation with the nurse, that works for the behavioral situation. I'm only asking for doctors who are different. The parents looking for an exception based on a medical condition. So we can clarify the language if that helps, if that would work for, to get that through. That's just my thought on that.
Can I, because it was my motion, can I amend the motion that I made?
Yes.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay. Then I'd like to amend the amended motion, if I could. It sounds like town meeting.
So the three that you've already.
The three that I were going to do, well, the three were strike the ear and ear loops,
Right.
change the hand to hang, which I still want to do. You know, I agree with you, Jenny. I think there needs to be a little bit more of a directive on medical.
So, right, so maybe
exemptions.
I could say, if you don't mind me just suggesting that it say something like, the written note from the physician is required for an exemption based on a medical condition.
That would work.
Or you could
I
shorten,
I would change my second to that second.
would you want to shorten it to just take out requested is required for a medical exemption?
Is required for a medical exemption.
Medical exemption.
That's
Not
fine,
requested exemption.
that's fine.
That's fine.
Medical exemption as opposed to behavioral. Okay, I'm fine with that. Joe?
That's where I think we got hung up is the behavioral thing. It's, behavioral thing, like Brian said, parents have to go to the doctor. I want an exemption. Okay,
So, and I also hear, Brian, what you're saying about discipline. So, you know, can we look at the paragraph? I don't want to spend too much more time on this. I think we have some consensus, but I hear what you're saying. So if we could look at that paragraph where it says, if students are in violation of this policy, the building principal will consult with the parent guardian to determine whether an exception is appropriate. That seems reasonable, right? Or the student may be removed from the school building for in-person learning until such time as they can comply with the requirement when the requirement is lifted. Brian, what are you thinking would be the appropriate solution if, you know, if the parents come in, they meet with the principal, teacher, and the principal and parents can't figure out a way for this student to wear a mask?
So you're gonna have, this is gonna happen, you're gonna have parents that don't agree with this.
Well, that's right.
So
And I'm okay with those kids aren't in school.
I understand,
Right. So,
but I'm not, because kids need to be educated, right? And it's not necessarily their fault. So, but then they're gonna go to remote learning. You know how I feel about remote learning. I would say, I'm okay with, you know, if the student is in violation of this policy, building principal handles the situation the way a principal normally handles any other situation. You know, I don't know how we write that language. Calling the parents may not be the best choice. What if they don't have parents?
well, every kid has a guardian, that's a parent/guardian.
But I don't necessarily call the parents to tell them that they kid, because the parents may not be either. So however, I'm okay with the principal dealing with it. But I don't want a kid removed from the building and put in remote learning at all. And just don't, I don't,
All right.
first of all, I don't think we need to, but, you know, principal handles it, maybe talks to the kid, you know, discusses the issue with them. But this is too strict. You're basically suspending a kid for no reason. And you send them home. And I don't want that.
All right, it sounds like you've reached an
Right,
impasse. So,
But I think, if you don't mind, Jenny, it does say, like you said to me earlier, students may be exempt from this policy due to special behavioral or individual needs as determined by the special education director. So the principal, special education directors, the parents and the child sit down together, and the principal determines through the special education director, okay, this student has behavioral problems that he's exempt from that, then that solves him not leaving school. You know what I mean? So that's where that piece is in there. So that's what it's.
I mean, I think if somebody's refusing to do this, if you refuse to comply, they're having behavior, right?
well, I guess that would be up to the principal. then.
Right.
Work out.
I just feel that this paragraph is just kind of a little bit strong when it's already been dealt with. The nurse and the special behavioral, special education director going to deal with it. So, I mean, in what circumstances we have a kid that hasn't already seen those two people that is now going back for remote learning because for whatever reason, I just don't like it. I mean, the whole paragraph, I don't like.
Understood. All right. We've had lengthy discussion on this. So I think we'll take a vote unless there's anything new. Should I do a roll call on this since Joe is remote, I think. Phil Morris,
Oh,
Brian Sullivan,
no.
Joe Tierney,
Yes.
Joe Glenn,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So motion passes. All right. Where are we on this agenda? Consent agenda is a donation of $100 to the Small Library from John and Deborah Mulkey from Marston Mills, and a donation of 12 backpacks from Mr. Mark Bordenberger of the Army Corps. And we all have information in our package related to those donations. We send our thanks to John and Deborah Mulkey and Mr. Warren Deborah donations. We also have 4 sets of minutes for the consent agenda.
Move the consent agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Bills, requisition, payroll, calendar is enclosed. As is the list of the draft list of school committee meetings for this coming year. That's the back of the package. We will introduce the changes, but there it is. We're going to do a public comment period. You say
Jenny, I'm sorry, just had a quick comment. I don't want to go on a long time about the letter that the Cape Cod Times from John Mulkey, Marston Mills, as an alumni of the Marguerite Small School. It is very important that we carry those legacies along wherever small school ends up or things like that. And that was a very important topic that we had in the building committee. Is the structure and the legacy of each school, the Mattocky School and Marguerite Small and Wixon. So when Wixon and Mattocky come together, we're going to each have their own identity. Whether it be so we could probably have something about David Wixon on the Wixon on that side of the school, something about the Mattockys and Indians on the other side of the school. The same thing hopefully will happen with the Marguerite Small School if and when that ever comes to fruition and that school is ever rebuilt to do something with it. Just I think it's important. Mr. Mulkey was very eloquent in his letter. I think it's important that people know that those legacies are going to continue no matter what school.
thanks, Joe. We are going to do a public comment period for half an hour, which is obviously even though we're starting a little late. The public is reminded that a school committee meeting is a meeting of a governmental body which members of the body deliberate of public business. We welcome your attendance and appreciate this review of school committees and conduct a regular business meeting. The school committee believes that the school district community should have an opportunity to comment to the committee on issues that affect the school district and within the scope of the committee's responsibilities. Again, this is not a question and answer period. We will try to get your questions answered in due time and by the correct people if we can, when we can. But this is essentially for you to comment on items we've discussed tonight or other items within our purview. Each person will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. And Carol has everyone on Zoom. And if anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand and Carol will call on you.
We have someone named Victoria Ann who could unmute, please.
Hello. This is actually Michelle Ryan. I'm with Victoria. Actually, we both have children in the district. First, we want to thank all the teachers and administration and the school committee. This is a huge task and we think you're doing a great job. Our only concern right now is, well, not the only, but the main one is, what's the remote learning going to look like come October 5th? Are the teachers ready for this? I fully planned on sending my 4 kids who are in 4 different schools in this district come September 16th. And I want to know, what's the remote going to look like? Are the parents and more importantly, are the teachers ready to do remote learning? That's my main concern. Thank you.
Would you like me to say anything about that? Just checking. You can feel free to call my office. I'd be happy to chat with you about it. This is Carol Weaver. We also have, I believe it might be Mona Mead. Mona, are you there and are you able to unmute or have you changed your mind? Michelle Conover, please.
Hey, thanks, and thanks for all the work you're doing. I do have a question. I know you may not be able to answer it now, but is there any other foreseeable issues that may hold up the start of school? I've been hearing things about food supply issues from things like that. And I just wanted to know if we're really going to have a start here, or if there's other things that perhaps are going to hold up outside of the HVAC and the busing issues, if there are any busing issues. And I think Ken is doing a great job, so thank you for that, Ken.
There's no food issue that I'm aware of. Anything today was conversation about what kind of order we might make depending on when we start. I feel I'll have a solid answer on the buses. They're stressed trying to get the routes done. Again, maybe those first 3 days and days that, depending on all the information we want to look at, being remote, but there's no lurking issue out there that I'm aware of, kind of to answer your question. Those are the 2 things, and we'll see how those both play.
Thanks, you're doing a real great job. We appreciate all the information.
Carol, is there anyone else?
I don't see any other hands right at the moment.
Anyone else for public comment? Going once.
I usually just we have, by the way.
How many on the Zoom now? Do you know?
I don't, oh, on the Zoom, 139.
139. All right. So that is the end of the public comment period. Would anyone like to make a motion to move us to executive session?
Madam Chair,
Please.
I'd like to make a motion, Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School Committee will enter an executive session not to return to public session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, if an open meeting may have detrimental effect on bargaining or litigation position of the public body and the chair so declares. DYEA negotiations, DYRSAA negotiations.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we'll take a roll call vote on that, please. Bill Morris,
Yes.
Brian Sullivan,
Yes.
Joe Tierney,
Yes.
Joe Lynn,
Yes,
and I vote yes. So we'll go to executive session. We will not come back to public. So that ends the public portion of the meeting.